Hello fellow mages, I'm Virti, and in this video I'll be taking you through the basic layout of code spells, teaching you the user interface and where to find things, and just generally how to delve into creating your own spells. If you're someone who's a seasoned programmer, then this will just give you the general layout so you can get straight into it. Whereas if you're quite new to programming or haven't really done it before, then I'll teach you how to use the game quite basically and explain a couple of different things just so you can get started. So when you first load up the game, you've got various options you can choose. Sandbox is used for creating a randomly generated world based on a seed number, and these other options are actual challenges that you can just delve straight into to test spells. So rather than having to run around a sandbox world trying to find a boulder, if you wanted to test a spell which say makes a boulder levitate, you could just jump into boulder cleanup or boulder drop and you're surrounded by boulders and you can just test your spells instantly. So for now, we're going to want to jump into Sandbox, so if you click on that one. The next screen will ask you to choose a seed number for randomly generating your world. This is quite useful at the minute because the game doesn't save your data. So if you want to enter in the same world and allow you to explore that same world and get used to it, so you've got some consistency, then it's good to enter in a seed number and remember that one. So one I quite like to use is 1991 because, well, let's face it, the 90s were pretty awesome. And when you've done that, just click the play button. And this will cause the game to actually generate the world based on that seed number. So now that the world has been generated, you can just go ahead and jump straight into it by clicking the start button. So as soon as you jump into that world, it'll spawn you in the same location every time. So if I enter in 1991 and every time I enter that world, I'll always spawn in the same location. So for starting off the user interface, this is what you'll be presented with. At the bottom right, you've got about 5 bars. The green one is your health bar, so if you take damage from enemies, that'll decrease. The other 4 are the amount of magic you have for each category. So different spells use different types of magics when they're cast. The yellow bar is for earth, the blue one is water, the red is fire, and the purple one is the relatively new element, which is air. At the top left, where it says 1 on my screen, you've also got, that tells you the spell that you currently have equipped. So if I was to push the button to cast spells, it would cast that spell that I've got equipped. If you go ahead and hit escape on your keyboard, it'll open up the main menu panel, where you can choose what you want to do. So for now, if we go to help, it'll show us the actual controls for the game. So they're pretty standard controls. You've got WASD to move around. To cast your spell, you just left click on the mouse, spacebar to jump. The F key is for broadcast activate. Now what that does is, say we have a spell which is a fireball, and when we cast it, the fireball will move forwards away from you, and when it hits an object it'll explode. But if we wanted the user to decide when specifically that fireball explodes, we would enter in some code so that we cast a spell, and then when the user hits the F key, the fireball would explode instantly, rather than having to wait for it to hit an object. That's pretty cool. The spell wheel is useful for selecting which spell you're going to use, and escape is obviously to bring up this menu itself. So if we go back to this and hit the tab button, this will bring up the spell wheel. Now this is where you'll select the spells that you're going to cast in game. As soon as you've hit the tab button, it'll pause the game. So if you're mid fighting an enemy, then it makes it much easier to select your spell and choose what you're going to do. At the top, you can cycle between the different elements. So spells are sorted on the wheel by the category of the type of magic you're going to use. So these are all the earth spells that rely on earth magic. And cycling through it, you've got water, all the water spells, and all your fire spells. Currently, air magic isn't on the spell wheel. That probably means I don't have any spells equipped. So let me show you how to do that now, actually. If you hit the escape button again, and you go up to the library tab, that will show all the spells that you currently have in your inventory. So up here we've got a couple of different tabs. My spells will show any spells that you've created, so if we click these ones and grey them out, that means they're hidden, and it'll only show spells that you've actually created yourself. The Ancients tab shows spells that you're given by default when you first start the game. Now, it says here under the Creator section that these were all created by the Ancients. That basically means that they were created by the game developers, and you're given these from the start. Other spells, I don't currently have any in there, but I think there are user-generated spells that you can maybe download to give them a try. You can also filter through your spells by the various elements. If I turned off air, water and air, it would show me all my spells that actually use fire magic. And sorry, this little section here tells you how much of each element type the spell is going to use. So this one, which is explode, which basically sends off a fireball, that uses 10 fire magic every time it's cast. To equip your spells, you can do it from this menu as well. Just actually click on the spell and then go down here and click the equip icon. And you see at the top left, my equip spell has changed to explode. So now if I fire that off, yep, there you go, you got fireballs shooting off. That's a pretty cool effect. Going back to that original menu, you can also add spells to the spell wheel. So you can choose which element of the spell wheel you want it to be added to. So if I go to Earth Spells, I've got a blank spot here. If I click on the fire spell and then click on this blank spot, the explode spell has now been added to the Earth element part of the spell wheel. So if I go back to the game and hit Tab, now in the Earth spell section I've got the explode spell, so I can just select it there. So let's delve into creating spells. So if you go back to your spell library, you've got various options you can do. So if you want to create a spell from scratch, you can go to New and click that, and I'll show you that in a second. But say for example you want to take an existing spell and edit it. Now if you take your spells that you've got, so I've got my spells down here, name them VS. Clicking on that one, I can just edit it directly. I can copy it, so that creates a copy of the spell, and then you can edit it so that if you break the spell or mess up, you can just delete it, and you still got your original kind of thing. If you take the ones created by the Ancients, then you can't edit those ones or remove them. But like I said, you can copy the spell, and then that gives you a duplicate, which is created by you, and then you can go in and actually edit the spell itself. So, sorry, this looks a bit complicated. I'll get back to this in a second. So, creating new spells, just go to New, and then you've got two options on how you can create it. You've got Blocky, which is a form of visual programming. You drag and drop things and slot them into place, which is really easy to get into, especially if you're new to programming. And you've also got JavaScript, which is where you write lines and lines of code. Now, if you're a seasoned programmer, that's probably the best way to go for you. Especially because it's just like using Unity. So if you've used Unity and you've programmed using MonoDevelop, then JavaScript, that's probably the best way for you to do it. For a new user, we'll go into Blocky. So after you've selected which way you want to develop your spell, you can click on the type of element it is. Now all this does is actually, if I click on water, that would then mean that this spell will be displayed in the water category. And the same with earth, fire and air. And then you can give it a spell name. So we're going to call this my first spell. And we're going to give this earth magic. So you select Blocky for doing it that way. Assign it to the earth category so that you can find it in your earth spells, and then give it a spell name. And then just click the next button. So now this brings up the actual coding behind the spell that you just created. When you first start off, you've got two functions which are given from the start, and that's onCreate and onHit. And they've got, when the spell's first created, it sets the speed of the orb to medium. So if I change that to stopped, and then I equip the spell, if we were to click the mouse and cast it, all it would do is create an orb immediately where your tip of your wand is. So as you can see, it's created an orb, but the orb isn't actually moving. So if we go back into that and set the speed to medium, then when we fire that off, that actually fire off the orb itself. Now currently all this orb does is when it hits something, it stops the orb from moving. So you can see these have hit the ground, and these orbs literally just stay there. To get it to actually do something more interesting, we've got various powers associated with each bit of magic. So we've got earth powers, water powers, fire powers, and air powers. In order to actually use these powers, we need to give the spell magic, which are displayed up here. So currently, this spell has 20 earth mana applied to it. So every time we cast this spell, you can see in the bottom right, it's taking up 20 earth mana. You can change that, and you can set it from anywhere between 0 and 200. This spell doesn't actually currently use any magic, so even though we're setting the mana to 20, it doesn't need it. So we can still fire off this spell, no problem, without any mana associated. To actually get these functions, you've got everything displayed on the left hand side here. So these ones in particular are up in control, and you've got on create, which whenever the spell is cast, anything in this section will be run. On hit is when the orb itself hits something, then any code in here will be run. And on activate is after the spell's been cast, if the user hits the F key, then anything in this section will be run. So these are given to you from the start. These are predefined functions. One of the best things about coding is you can actually create your own functions. And these lines down here are what you would use to call in a function that you've created. Now I'll go into detail on these in just a little bit, but for now let's get you creating some spells. So to give this spell something to do, this is an earth spell, so if we go into earth powers, we've got various options we can use, and probably the most simple one to start off with is change rock. So if we grab this, we can drag it into the onCreate function. In fact, no, if we drag it into the onHit function, you see that little golden V just below set orb speed? That means that when we let go, this line will be added to the onHit. So now that's been added in, and when we move this around, it's all connected. So change rock, if you click in this little middle bit here, you can choose what's going to happen when it hits a piece of rock. So we can change it to dig strong, which is, dig a large hole, I think, or dig a small hole. Raise is it makes the rock increase in height, or raise strong makes it increase in a great deal of height. And it also tells you how much magic that's going to need for each time that spell's cast. So that box tells you that it's yellow, so that's earth mana, and it needs 50 earth mana whenever that orb hits a piece of rock to make it bigger. So if you go up here into the earth mana and type in 50, and then again go to equip, and whenever this hits a piece of rock, so we'll just fire it in front of us. Yep, there you go, it's raised a nice little piece of dirt. I wonder if that works on mountains as well. Yeah, yeah, that kind of does. That's pretty cool. So getting back into it, you've got all these various magics you can use. Now, I'm not going to go through detail each one. Half the fun of this game is just to slot things in and experiment and give them a shot kind of thing. But probably the most important things to remember is that you've got these various functions, or sorry, you've got these various lines of code which you can drag and just stick into something, and then you can actually pull stuff out, slot different things in, edit values, and just, experiment and give it a shot. If you want to get rid of this, you can right click it and click disable, and what that does is that turns it grey, which means whenever this part of the spell is running, this line will be ignored, so that won't run. If we enable that again, so now it will run because you can see it's not greyed out. If we were to right click that again and delete, that'll just get rid of that line entirely. So let's add in something else. So currently your orb, what it does is it fires off when you cast a spell and it raises a piece of dirt. But I think those orbs are still currently there. If I was to lower the dirt, let me go to the spells that we've already got. In fact, I'll just change the spell that we've already got. So I'm going to change that to dig strong. We fire that off now. Yep, that gets rid of that slightly. Keep on getting rid of it. Yeah, you can see I've got all these large collection of orbs. So my spell has been cast, it's hit the rock, and it's caused it to either raise or lower, but that orb is still hanging around. So if we want to get rid of that orb, all we do is go into orb and properties. Oh, no, it's not in here. Sorry, it's probably in control. Yep, here we go, in control. And you've got this one called destroy orb. So if we were to grab that and drag that into on hit, that means whenever this orb hits something, it's going to stop the orb from moving. It's going to dig a hole in the rock where the orb is hit, and it's then going to destroy the orb. So now, if we cast off this spell, it's dug a hole, and you can see the orb is no longer there. So these are functions on create and on hit. You can also, one thing which is really cool is create your own functions. So say we wanted to do a piece of code and we want to use it multiple times. Rather than writing out each line like 20 times, we could just create a function and then call that function to run multiple times. So to give you an example of that, if we go to functions, then we click this top one and drag it in. This is how you create your function. This little box here is what you actually name the function, so that when you call it, you specify the name of the function, so you call different functions. So we're going to call this one test func, and just hit enter. If we wanted to call this function, we would go to control, and remember I told you about these two down here. So we'll use call function and drag that into on hit, and if you click this box here, you can specify which function you want to be run whenever this segment of code is activated. So we've called it test func, so type in test func. You can also choose a delay time if you want, so that's how many seconds delay, so how many seconds the code will wait before it actually calls this function, executes the code. So if we click in here and type in 3 seconds, then when the orb hits something, it'll wait 3 seconds before it calls this function. Lastly, let's make it do something. So we'll take destroy orb and drag it into the function. So now when we cast this spell, it'll create a hole, and you see the orb is still there, and then after 3 seconds it should be destroyed. Okay, it's not been destroyed. So this is what you're going to find whenever you program. You're going to have errors every once in a while, and your spell is not going to do exactly what you want it to do. So we go back into the spell and see what we did wrong. Ah, there's the problem. We created a function called test func. Now we spelt func F-U-N-C, but when we called the function, we typed test func and we spelled it F-U-N-K. So it's trying to find a function spelt that way, but there isn't one that exists. It has to be spelt exactly the way you've written it. So we click on this, delete it again, and try again. Test func, and hit enter. And then if we equip that and try it again. Okay, cast a spell. Yep, we've got our hole, we've got our orb floating in the sky, and then yep, it's now disappeared after 3 seconds. So that gives you a general rundown of creating a spell. You've got all these other different complicated things you can do, but like I said, the best method is just to delve into each of these and explore, mess around, drag things into your own code and just see what happens. So hopefully guys, this gives you a basic understanding as to what you can do in the game and how you can just get started at delving into your code and try different things. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and next I'll be creating a couple of new spells, just messing about. Ones which actually work and I've bug tested. I'll actually upload videos for those so you guys can give them a try as well and just follow the tutorial along if you want to. So thanks guys, and talk to you next time.